In a typical microservice architecture, you kind of want to have one database per microservice. Now, because I'm running out of resources and I'm using the Mac M1, and if I basically have a bunch of containers for different database servers or instances, then I'm going to run out of space very soon. So what I'm going to do is within our main server, so Amigos code, let's have yet another database inside. So we have customer. So let's also create the fraud database. So save. And basically what I'm saying is, so within our Docker Compose in here, you can see that we have services, and this is Postgres. And basically what I'm saying is we would need basically to have another service for fraud, right? But so this you'd say, for example, Postgres and then fraud. But because I'm going to run out of resources in my computer, so I'm just going to reuse the exact same database instance and have a database inside. But ideally, again, in a microservice architecture, you want to have the database servers independently. Now let's add the configuration. So I'm going to copy from the customer microservice in here. So let's just copy the data source. So all of this will be the exact same thing. So application.yaml, and then paste that in. And I need to indent this a little bit. Now this is a valid configuration. And now instead of customer, this will be fraud, because now we have the fraud database in here, and the username will be Amigos code, and the password will also be password. But as I said, so this usually would be a different database, but in our case, we're just reusing the exact same instance, and then within it, we have the fraud database. So now let's open up the pom.xml for fraud. And we need to add the Spring Data JPA as well as the Postgres driver in here. So make sure that you have these two dependencies the same way that we've done for customer. And now what we're going to do is within our main package, let's create a new Java class, and we're going to name this as fraud check history. And within it, we need the data, builder, all R constructors, and no R constructors, and make sure to import all of these. And we also need the @entity. So this is for JPA, and within it, let's have the ID. So the ID will be the same way that we've done with customer, but we're going to have the sequence for fraud instead. So and then ID. Let's have the sequence generator. Make sure that this is for fraud. So here, make sure that the name is fraud ID sequence, and fraud ID sequence for the sequence name. Let's also have the generated value, and let's import this. The same for type. And last but not least, we need the ID. So private integer and then ID. Let's also have the customer ID, just like that. I also want to have a Boolean just to make sure that we store the result whether the customer is a fraudster or not. So is fraudster. And finally, I want to record when this check took place. So local and then date time and created and then @. And to be honest, this is it. Now what we have to do is restart the fraud microservice and just make sure that everything works. There we go. You can see that we have create table and we also have the sequence. If I open up pgadmin and in here, refresh, and then if I go to schemas, public, we should have one sequence, fraud ID sequence, as well as one table with all these 4 columns. Next, let's go ahead and build the controller, service, as well as the repository.